there's a really vivid memory, and sometimes I wish I put it in, but I remember ending a 2 week long event of binge drinking and just vomiting so violently that I shredded my esophagus and I had to go to the hospital and I collapsed the lung and I couldn't breathe. And it was just, my brother flew up to spend a week with me in the hospital. And I was like right back to drinking right at. So that's where I was with drinking at the time. It was that bad. It was life and death at the time. And I turned to an alternative. And then that's where I first found heroin in the dorm room. It just was a rapid decline. And it was hard for me because I was so isolated in a different state with all my family being back here that I could kind of get away with a lot of stuff. And people that were worried about me were worried, but they couldn't quite check up on me.
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. A Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges, spirituality, ADHD, or maybe just family, travel, and logistics. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison, with your mystery meat sandwich.
Greetings, compadres. So, guess what's happening for the mystery meat sandwich? Nothing. That's right, nothing. Because I'm like bouncing off the walls, excited because, all right. So I met somebody at the 20 Books Vegas conference and read his book, and I'm just pumped. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm over the moon. I'm pumped that he's here. And his name is Jordan Barnes. And so next month, for the month of February, we're reading his book called One Hit Away. So there it is. If you are viewing this, I am showcasing it at the moment. And I love it. And also, Jordan, you can download it on your website, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Or you can also listen to it on Audible, which is very popular with my age group, as they're doing a lot of carpooling and stuff like that. So I'm going to save a lot of my personal comments about it for the Boozeless Book Club. But I was so moved by the book, Jordan, that I'm really glad you're here. And so I'm honored. I just don't even know what to say. I think it takes a lot of courage to tell one story. And I know we get used to it. Those of us who are in the recovery world, we get used to it a little bit to an extent, but it's just hard reliving some of those moments. And so thank you for doing that so authentically so that you could put your book out and share your story with the world. So Jordan P. Barnes is a grateful alcoholic and addict in recovery, and Sand Island Treatment Center is his home group. Residing in beautiful Kailua, Hawaii, with his lovely wife, Chelsea, and 2 sons, Jordan has been sober from all mind and mood-altering substances since August 29th, 2011. He's an independent author and card-carrying member of the Hawaii Writers Guild. His debut book, One Hit Away, which I showed, a Memoir of Recovery, won 2020's Best Book of the Year award from IndiesToday.com and was a Bragg Medallion honoree. Now, I meant to look that up, Jordan, so you might have to tell me what that is later, but as
Sure.
well as a finalist in both the 15th Annual National Indie Excellence Awards and the 2021 Independent Author Network Book of the Year Awards. His other titles include Bridgetown, a harm reduction novel, Rules to Die By, From Heroin Addiction to Life in Long-Term Recovery and Beyond, and his forthcoming book, which is releasing in 2 weeks, y'all, 2 weeks, people, Late Blight, and I'm gonna mess this up, can you say it in Hawaiian? I apologize.
Ko'olaus.
Okay, Ko'olaus, a novel.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm fangirling up in here. I'm ridiculously excited that Jordan is here. So I'm going to launch into three quick fun facts. Two of them he knows, one he does not know. So my favorite all-time city in Hawaii, all the islands, is Kailua. So when I learned that Jordan was from Kailua, I got really overly excited and tried not to act so excited, but I was really excited. So, and I love Oahu in general, sidebar, because I love that it has got something for everybody. You know, it's got like the North Shore, it's got like the Disney thing, it's got all the things. So anyway, sidebar, I don't know if Agnes's Portuguese bakery still exists, but the last time I was there, they were not open. And I was pissed off, like pissed, because I love getting boxes of malasadas and bringing them home, like just eating my feelings on the way home. So anyways, that was sad. But second, Jordan and I are class of 2011. We both got sober in the same year, which is always fun. I love having recovery peeps, you know, who we share kind of the same amount of sobriety. And fun fact number 3. So this is news to Jordan. I did not tell him this yet. It's not that exciting, but it's kind of fun. Okay. I think that we should start a new face group. A Facebook group. How about that? And okay, here's what it should be called. Children of Jerry's. Okay. #COJ, #COG, because wait for it. Both of our moms are named Jerry. What? Now they spell it a little differently. Okay. My mom is spelled Gerri. I know. Crazy.
The audacity.
I know. I mean, what? Didn't she get the memo? Because Jordan's mom spells her name Jeri. So, I mean, it's similar, but not the same. So, my question for you, Jordan, is growing up, did you have any friends whose moms were named Jerry? Because I did not.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
We had like Deborah, Carol, Ellen, occasionally like maybe like a Mary Lou, but no Jerry's. So
I didn't have a Mary Lou either.
wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a weird California thing. I have no idea. Okay, so hooking this into us actually beginning this podcast after this very long intro, what was cool was that, you know, of course, I noticed throughout the book that your mom's name was Jerry, and then I won't give it away. Here's your Jerry cliffhanger for the day. But there's a very cool little but significant turning point, a little cool thing in Jordan's book that talks about the human connection, really, of somebody important who was of significance at that time having the same, or having, I guess, a mom with the same name. So I just thought that was cool, just kind of a neat thing. So all of that to say, you're going to have to read the book because we're reading it for February. So go ahead and get yourself a copy of One Hit Away. And so what I'd love to do is just turn this over to you, Jordan, and just feel free to tell as much or as little of your story as you'd like, and we'll just go from there.
That was a wonderful introduction. I've watched, you're really good at introductions.
Oh, thanks.
I've seen some. And also, before I forget, I do have a malasada truck scene in my forthcoming book because I love malasadas too. And so my main character and his daughter go to grab malasadas and they have a heart to heart. So, but that's at Leonard's famous malasada truck. So
thank you. That is fantastic.
If you're ever in Hawaii, Kai.
Oh my gosh. And now I can't wait to read it. All right. Good.
So yes, we both got clean sober at the same time. I read your book as well, and it's fantastic. And it was a wonderful read. And there's actually a lot of similarities between you and my wife and her pregnancies and all that. So it was really kind of, it was really cool to read, cool to see. And I think we share probably much more in common than we know. Um, I, I'm the youngest of three boys. I grew up here in Hawaii. I grew up with a mom and a dad. They're still together, wonderful parents, love each other, a lot of love throughout the family. And somehow, some way, all three of us boys ended up with our own struggles and addictions. And so I'm fortunate in that I found my pathway into recovery through a roundabout way back in 2011. And I had a lot of support to get me to that point. I had parents. There's, someone just left a book review and it was really fascinating, but they talked about all the people that came into my life throughout the story. And I thought that that was so important to show that I had all that support. So before I get ahead of myself, I've struggled with some form of addiction since I was a kid, whether it was addiction to sugar, to being a daredevil, to whatever it was. I've always been, my dad used to call me Mr. Spontaneous kid or something. And like at the time it was cute, but I think it delves into my personality quite a bit. I really got into drinking alcohol heavily at an early age. And I started drinking really heavily around 14 to 15. And if now being a parent myself, I'm like, that's crazy. Like there's a young kid getting drunk. And, that was the kids I was running with. I went to a private school. A lot of kids had a lot of freedoms. They had a lot of access, and it was just the kids kind of ran wild, at least with the group that I ran with. I got my first DUI at the age of 16. I got my second DUI at the age of 17. Like in your book, I won't give away too much, but like the second one sort of was what started a lot of it for me. I lost my license for a year, which is really hard when you're 17 years old and in high school. And like the one thing any teenager yearns for is freedom. And I didn't have a car or a vehicle, and it was really tough. And it was just really hard to manage. And, I ended up getting kicked out of high school. I had to go to another high school to graduate. That was a story in and of itself. But my addictions really started heavily with drinking. And both of my brothers have had their own severe addictions. I lost one brother to alcoholism a couple years ago, and that was a horrific ending to just the way it played out. Broke everyone's heart. It was just very tough to get through. My other brother is clean and sober, and I'm clean and sober. And it's that sort of dichotomy of recovery where some get it, some don't, that it rubs me raw because it's so painful for my parents, right? So my parents have this kid that turns his life around, and then they lose a son. And it's just, addiction just runs through our family. It's decimated, not just our immediate family, but I have a lot of uncles. I have grandpa. It's just there, and it's always been there, except for my dad, because my dad, I believe, he's told me once, I've wondered, why don't you struggle with alcohol? Why don't you drink so much? And I think with him, it was, he grew up in the house of an alcoholic, and didn't want to be like that, and vowed to not be like that. So my story starts with just addiction, being on probation at the age of 17. I had a probation officer in high school, and I was on a year-long probation. I ended up turning my stuff around, and that was sort of indicative of the way that I handled a lot of my issues. Things would go south, and I would kind of pump the brakes, and I would right the ship, and I would fix things. I got straight A's. I got a scholarship to college, and then it would all just like cascade down again. And so that's the rhythm and cycle of how addiction played out in my life. When I went to college in Oregon, and in Oregon's where I found myself in a lot of trouble because I was still drinking heavily, and I ended up in a situation where I was exposed to heroin for the first time. And I was actually looking for a way out of drinking. My drinking was so bad as a binge drinker that I was just sick of it. There's so many stories that you probably can relate to this. There's so many stories that don't make it into your books, but there's a really vivid memory. And sometimes I wish I put it in, but I remember ending a 2-week long event of binge drinking and just vomiting so violently that I shredded my esophagus, and I had to go to the hospital, and I collapsed the lung, and I couldn't breathe. And it was just, my brother flew up to spend a week with me in the hospital. And I was like right back to drinking right at. So that's where I was with drinking at the time. It was that bad. It was life and death at the time. And I turned to an alternative. And then that's where I first found heroin in the dorm room. It just was a rapid decline. And it was hard for me because I was so isolated in a different state with all my family being back here that I could kind of get away with a lot of stuff. And people that were worried about me were worried, but they couldn't quite check up on me. And that sort of allows things to balloon like a wildfire. And basically I went through a lot of rough times and dark days and dark nights. And I, with the support and love of my parents who came to Oregon to find me and to get me off the streets when I was homeless at the time, they helped get me into a treatment center back here in the state of Hawaii. And that started I call it like the arduous and unlikely journey of recovery, because that's what it was at the time. I was not looking to get clean and sober. I was running away from, how the book opens. There was this very traumatic event in my life, and the police were looking for me, and I knew I was going to jail. I could feel it. I could sense it. I deserved it. And I was just running from that. And so I was like, hey, I'll go hide out in Hawaii. There's an inpatient treatment center. Okay. I'm not really interested in getting clean, but I can go and hide out for a bit, and then I'll make my way back. And that was my thinking at the time. And of course, our flight on the way back got delayed, and I ended up getting a flight voucher that was in my name, and it was a one-way ticket. It was life can be funny and cruel at the same time somehow. But yeah, and so that's it. Then I went to treatment. I went to a 2-year long-term inpatient program. That was its own thing. That was its own beast. And I stuck it out, and I ended up, I'm here today, and 11 years sober, clean sober. And that's it. And I wanted to write a story. I think that it was really important to write all the stories. I love memoirs and biographies. All the stories I've read about addiction, not all, but many of them really focus on the actual drug use and the drug logging, the war stories. And when I was in treatment, there was actually a rule that you couldn't do that. You would actually get in trouble if you would shoot the, talk. If you would do that, like that's not the lifestyle that they were trying to promote. And so when I wrote the book, I kind of carried that ethos, and I really didn't want to focus on the using as much as because I could probably write a crazy book about using if I wanted to. I'm sure I could, but I wanted to tell a story on recovery, and that was my main goal.
Well, you nailed it. I mean, you completely did. It's such a good story that it's like you almost go, is this fiction? Are we sure this is a memoir? Do you know what I mean? Like, it has that power to it that and then you realize nobody could actually make this up. You know what I mean? But you do such a great job of telling it and telling it authentically. And I can't even tell you how much I appreciated that, because the authenticity with which you told everything, and talking about the feelings that went along with some of these events. And I was blown away. It was very inspirational for me to read for whatever comes next in my world. I love to, this is kind of an opinion, but a lot of times today we're sort of trying to be a little bit politically correct with how we talk about alcoholism and, calling it substance use disorder and all that. And I'm down. I'm so down. Whatever you want to call it is wonderful. But I loved that you, mentioned that, you had a 12-step community at your treatment center, and what that was like for you. And it seemed pretty hardcore, that treatment center. There was no fooling around, it's not like you were hanging out by the pool getting massages. So
no, there's no pool. There's no pool. It's a wonderful place. It saved my life. And it's also it's serious business. And I will say that when many people think of treatment centers, their first thought is some resort, either in Hawaii or in California, where you go and you stay for 30 days and all your needs are met. And while all your needs are met at Sand Island, it's also the lion's share of the population is either coming by way of prison or they're coming from jail or drug court. And it really is the last stop for many people, myself included. And there is no like frills and stuff going on. And it was rough. It was really tough. But you know what? By doing that, they could keep the costs down and they were able to help more people. And so there's a lot to be said for running a tight ship, like they say. But yeah, it was a boot camp recovery style thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably as close as you're going to find anywhere throughout the States, I think.
That's amazing. Did you feel when you were there, did you feel like, man, what is going on with this place? Like, why are they so...
Absolutely.
Yeah, I couldn't understand that in treatment. Like, why are you guys being so hard on me? Like, this is literally what I thought at the time.
And it's funny as you age and mature and you look back on things. And I definitely went through all of those feelings of who are these people? Why are they so strict? Why are some of them angry? But you look back and after watching so many of the people I was in there with either relapse, die, go to jail, there's a lot on the line, and there's families destroyed by addiction. And there's a reason, I think, why at least some places go that route, to just be kind of cut the fat, and they get right to the business. But yeah, I struggled. I had to process a lot of that. I had no idea what I was walking into. I didn't even know it was a 2-year program. My mom and dad were like, "Oh, there's a treatment center that's going to take you. Like, how fortunate are you?" And I was like, "Okay, cool. If that's how it's
by the way, it's 2 years. It's not 30 days.
You can still go to their website, and I think it's sandisland.com, and it's literally the same website it was back in 2000. And it's like a beautiful picture of, I think it's Kualoa Ranch, which is nothing. It's on the whole, like another side of the island. There's not much going on on the website. It's very cryptic, and it's hard to find information because I was trying to look at my angles on the way there. I was like, "Mom, can I borrow your phone to look at this? Like, can I Google this place? Can I see what's going on?" But yeah, it was eye-opening for sure. But my point that I was saying was, as I'm older and I look back, I'm still grateful to have that, because I probably wouldn't have, I don't know if I would have stuck it out. And I think it's really cool that every single person that works there, almost every single person that works there, is in recovery themselves. And almost all of them have gone through the program before too. So my counselor came to that program like 20 something years ago. And it's just, it's the cycle. They kind of pull people out. Like, do you have any job prospects? No, want to be an intern, want to learn, want to get certified, want to learn counseling. And it's really cool that those people can relate so well, because it's easy to talk to someone when he's like, "I know where you're coming from because I was just like you." And I don't know how you go to school for that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's got to be really tough to try and relate to somebody who hasn't been there in this kind of situation. And did you get that? I don't know, I call it like the gift of desperation. Like, when I first was like dumped on the door of treatment, I was kind of not interested. We'll put it mildly like that, right? And then like the second time around that I went to my treatment center, it's not like I was interested, but it was like, I knew I had to get serious. I didn't have a choice. I had to try. And I had that little seed. But did you feel right away that, because I know you also had some legal stuff going on as well. So did you kind of just like have that, I want to get out of trouble? Or did you kind of go, you know what, I might have like, I don't know, some little things brewing inside me that maybe this might work?
No, not at first, not at all. I didn't believe it was possible to get clean, and I was there for the wrong reasons in the beginning. I really was. I was running scared. And it's like one of life's great mysteries that I'll never know why the cops were looking for me. I never found out. And, I ended up at, having to turn myself in at one point, and it's just never been resolved. And it's like, I'll never know. But it took me a long time. It took me 30 days of sleep. So before I went to treatment, I went to a detox center. I was injecting heroin multiple times a day. I was doing speedballs, so heroin and cocaine. I had completely stopped drinking by that point because the heroin addiction took over, and the two for me never mixed. And so alcohol had been out of my life for a long time, but I was so strung out that even with the weekend detox, even with the week-long detox at the inpatient detox center, prior to going to treatment, I was sick as a dog for a month, and I didn't sleep. I had restless leg syndrome. I was sick to my stomach. I was depressed. I was jittery. I was angry. I was very highly emotional. I was just a wreck, and I was processing a lot of things, both physically and mentally. And then on top of that, I had this unknown burden with. I knew I had 2 felony warrants, but I also didn't know what the cops were looking for me. And if it was what I thought it was not good. And so basically, with those things, I don't know. I just ended up sticking it out, and it's one of those things where, not to discredit a short-term treatment program, because those work wonders. My brother went to a short-term program, and he's got many years clean sober. It works for people. But being in that program, for me, just not sleeping for a month, I think, like, when the fog started to clear, that's when I started to kind of realize that maybe this was a possibility. And then I started to fight for it, and then I started to work hard, and I started to listen and follow directions, and talk less and think more and stuff like that. And it's that shift. It's that mental change. And I think it's easier when you're surrounded by people that are going through the same thing. Then you also watch from examples. So you watch people leave the program, and you hear stories, and you have the counselor come in and be like, remember John S? Well, he's dead. And like, just very matter of fact, and you're like, man, I was just talking to that guy 2 weeks ago. And that's when things sort of start to become really real. But I was in a fog for a long time, and it was hard to get out of that. But yeah, I definitely had that moment. I think the moment for me I wrote about was when I was at the beach. I was just finally, like, found solace and alone time to be alone after being in that program for a long time. And I went out and passed the beach, and I had what many would call the spiritual awakening. And it was just, able to look inward and think about my life and where I was going, and how lucky I was, and the opportunities I had ahead, and a lot going on. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to detoxing, and a lot to those programs.
Yeah, it's so true. And the not sleeping thing, it's like, and this because you're a parent too. It's kind of like, I mean, you can tell why that's like a tactic that people use in when they're trying to get information out of people. It's like, oh yeah, not sleeping, I'm going to cough up whatever you want to know. It's just kind of,
right.
It just takes you to this crazy place. And, I love that you mentioned that, because it's they're not little things at the time. They're not little things, but it is those little things that learning how to do. It's just hard. It is hard stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst thing that could happen, I remember a counselor telling me this in rehab, is like, okay, so what's the worst that could happen? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to sleep. And they said, yeah, so you might be tired tomorrow, right? But you're going to get over this. And I just couldn't see past the right now. Like, that's all I could see, right? And so, but it's a whole bunch of those little things that learning to redo, learning to actually get through without trying to escape, that was just really tough. Like, even this day and age kind of thing, in this place in my sobriety, funny things will happen. Like, I embarrass myself a lot, or, I had a conversation with somebody at my kid's school the other day, and it was just crunchy. It was just awkward. And you know what? It's like, so what? So it was awkward, like, no big deal, and you just kind of learn to navigate life. But it's just those early stages they make you want to crumble, so it's just incredible to hear you, share some of those stories too. And yeah, lot of great stuff in there, like the sandwiches and all that. You'll have to read it, listeners. You'll have to read it. So, but yeah, I appreciated that. Now I'm dying to know how you met Chelsea.
So Chelsea my wife has roots here. So her grandma and grandpa live here. Her mom is from here, but she lived in El Segundo and Boston and grew up on the mainland. And she came out here for work. And so we met shortly after she moved out, and we went out for dinner. We had sushi, and it was just like a wonderful first date that kept getting extended. And we went down to this beautiful place called China Walls, where it's like a cliff that overlooks the ocean. And it was a glassy moon, and there was some old fishermen behind us. And the entire night we just could hear the whipping of his fishing pole. It was a beautiful night. And we ended up, I fell for her really quick. And I think my dad said it at our wedding. I don't remember saying this, but he said the day after you met her, you told me I met my wife. And so I'll just take his word for it. I don't have the best memory. I've done a lot of damage. And yeah, we ended up getting married, but we met when we met out here, and it was just a wonderful first date that kept going. Really easy to talk to, really easy to get along. I really likable person. And I'm really fortunate to have her in my life, because now I'm a dad, and I've got a wonderful wife, a beautiful family, a budding, growing Ohana. But yeah, she moved out here for work. And I also fell in love with her family, which I think is really important too. Like, I have had so many relationships where the family hated me or didn't like me or didn't want me around, or thought that the other person could do better. And they were probably right at that time. And it was nice to have that relationship with a family. And, I asked her dad, I did ask her dad if I could marry her. That was a wonderful experience and all that. But
that's amazing. So cool. And these are like the gifts of recovery, right? That who knew?
Who knew? Yeah. I mean, like, she's so out of my league. Don't tell her. She may watch this.
I love it. Aside from when you went back to Portland to take care of some things, have you been back to Portland? Do you picture yourself, little tropical bug action floating through the air?
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Are you able to go back to the Pacific Northwest now? That's good. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not like banned.
I'm sorry. I should have been more specific. I was wondering.
I know what you meant.
Oh, okay.
Am I able to physically? Yeah. I'm very fortunate in that my life that I don't, triggers aren't something I have to deal with. If ever. I'm very, I don't know, I've gone through enough that I'm just grateful that I don't have to deal with that stuff. So something that could be a trigger, probably the way I tend to look at it is like, I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that. I have gone back to Oregon. I've gone back twice. I went back and I did, I went back to turn myself in. And then I went back last year. A friend passed away, and we unfortunately lost a really close friend, one that I wish I had stayed in better contact with. And I hadn't. And so I have, some regrets with that. And she just passed away really unfortunately. So I went back to be there for her celebration of life, specifically to tell her family and kids how much she meant to me. And I think that's really important. And then while I was there, I was working on my other book that's set in Portland, my first novel. And so I did a bunch of research, and I also went and revisited some old haunts. And I went by Hooper Detox and said hi and gave them some copies of my book. I went to Powell's Books, and I gave out a stack of books out front, just gave out copies of the memoir, walked around. And it was kind of weird. I was like, what am I doing? Like, I didn't, it's almost like if someone comes and puts like a flyer in your hand, it's like, who are you to do this? But a lot of people just took them, and it was great. And it was really, the city had changed substantially, with the riots or with the protests, all of that stuff. It was sad to see, because it was such a beautiful city, and there's just a lot of like sidewalks where there's just graffiti, and just a lot of the city needs to heal, basically, is my outside opinion. And it was rough to see, but it was also good to go back and kind of revisit those things. And it was like a trip down memory lane, because I don't only have bad memories of Portland. It was a really beautiful time, and I love that city. It's got a place in my heart, and it's a really gorgeous, wonderful place with really cool people. I saw Haven too, who was sort of she's a harm reductionist Harm Reductionista. She runs Outside In, and that's the syringe services program or needle exchange. And I got to see her, and that was really good because she helped me so much with writing and taught me so much with Bridgetown. But yeah, it was good to see. It was good to get it done. And but I went back. My priority was to give my condolences to the family. And her name was Jessie. She's a wonderful person, and she's missed dearly.
Thank you for sharing that. And the harm reduction thing is actually something I wanted to ask you about. And I don't know why. I kind of know why, but it seems like some of these things are like hot topics. And I can't figure out exactly, maybe it's because I'm too close to understanding, the addiction part of it. But, I talked to a woman not long ago who she lost her son. He committed suicide, but he was a heroin addict and he just could not, it's that story. I'm sure you've heard, been to 25 treatment centers and all this, and he couldn't kick it. And she's a, huge proponent, obviously, for harm reduction. And I don't know. Do you think maybe it's just that people are kind of like, oh, you just gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps and kick that addiction? Or what do you think the problem is? I don't know if that made sense.
Well, it makes sense. It's a couple things. It's the politicization of science. It's a lack of education. In some instances, it's a lack of compassion. And in some instances, it's a source of pain from someone who's had personal experience, having maybe lost a loved one who suffered with substance use disorder, and it's just when you learn, the more you learn about harm reduction. Our country is far behind many other countries when it comes to how we deal with addiction and people struggling with addiction. It's not like we have to reinvent the wheel here. We just need to look to other places who have done who are miles ahead of us. And anything from like a safe consumption space, which is also a bar, if you think about it, right? A bar is a safe consumption space. You know what you're getting. You're getting your legal, your regulated supply, and you're using in moderate. But harm reduction, especially syringe exchanges, when I wouldn't be here because they had given me naloxone that was used on me to reverse an overdose. I've reversed multiple overdoses from for people I know with naloxone I got for free from that program. Also, even though I did end up acquiring Hep C, had I not had access to clean syringes, I probably, who knows what would have happened? It's hard to say, right? But I'm just very fortunate that I had access to clean supplies because it's a way to keep down cross-contamination, spreading of diseases. And the last thing is you can't recover if you're dead, right? So it's a multifaceted discussion that just, if people can just sit and listen, maybe open their minds, they would probably have a better understanding of why they do what they do, because harm reduction saves lives. There's no question about it. And it's unfortunate that it becomes like this political hot topic, because that just does a disservice to these people that have committed their lives to helping others. It's health, and it's really simple when you talk to someone who knows about it. So I'm even just like, I'm probably not the best one to talk about it, but I've learned what I've learned, especially writing this last book, and as someone who took and benefited from those programs. But yeah, definitely, I would say the politicization of science, lack of education, ignorance, and maybe unwillingness to learn, pretty much would sum it up. Yeah.
I love that. And speaking of which, tell us about your new book. So exciting.
So I am about to release my fourth book. It's my second novel. I've got it here.
Woo!
It's called Late Blight in the
Koalaus.
The Koalaus are a beautiful mountain range out here on the island of Oahu. And this is a story about a man. It's a fictitious story. It's a story about a man who pled not guilty by reason of insanity and went into the system, went through competency restoration, went into the Hawaii State Psychiatric Facility. And then it's a story of his transitioning from the hospital into community living and the dilemmas and issues that arise when you have that sort of baggage that people are either afraid of, or they don't want to understand, or don't want you. It's basically a story about mental health. And it's really interesting how it came to be. A reader who read Bridgetown reached out to me, and we have a mutual friend, Jen Cutting, and her name is Courtney Whitecoat. She's a forensics therapist. And she said, I love the way that you write about people in this syringe exchange. And I wonder if you would ever write about my people, because I work with a highly stigmatized group of people, and they don't get a fair shake in movies and entertainment and whatnot. And so my initial guttural reaction was to say no, because it's not something I know. And you know what they say, write what you know. But then Courtney offered to be there every step of the way, which she was. She sent me a case of books. I've met a bunch of wonderful people. I've talked to a lot of people. I've interviewed a number of them, and I've had some sensitivity readers, and it's been a wonderful process. I've learned a bunch. And so this book comes out on February 13th. And it's a wonderful story about basically reintegrating back into society, which, was interesting to me, because in many ways, when I learned about the way that these low security wards are run, it's asynchronous, if that's the right use of that word, to an inpatient treatment center. So it felt much like the same schedule, the same people, the same day. And in that sense, I know that experience of going through that, and the issues that come up when you try to move out, and where you're going to go, who you're going to be with, how are you going to protect your sobriety, how are you going to find a job, how are you going to have stable housing, how are you going to find healthy hobbies, and all that. So part of me wants to keep writing and telling stories. And I think that I like to write about mental health and substance use disorder. And I think it's a good book. It's definitely like a slow burn. It's got some really exciting parts, but I think if you pick it up and read it, you'll be smarter by the time you're done. And that's my goal with every book, is to educate and entertain. And that's sort of what I'm shooting for. So I hope it hits well and resonates with people.
I'm sure it will. You have a great talent for writing. I mean, like, here's the deal. I'm not just saying that. Like, this is something, when I would put the book down and have to go do other things, I was like, rewinding to One Hit Away, but just referring to your writing in general based on that one. I'd be like, what happened? I got to find out what happened next, And that's always to me the sign of like, oh, that's somebody who's got talent, And so I'm looking forward to reading it for sure. And I love that you are able to switch back and forth. Like, okay, I'm going to do a novel, and then I'm going to do a memoir, and then I'm going to do fiction, like another fiction. I think that's great. Yeah, I admire that. Do you have a kind of a set idea of kind of what your next book might be, or are you just kind of like, we'll see what happens, we'll see what presents itself?
Yeah, I'm working on I want to write a thriller. I think that using my experience, I have a really good, I think I have a really good plot for basically a missing persons thriller, and that's what I'm working on now. And when we met at 20 Books, besides meeting other people that write nonfiction, right, in the quit lit space, there's not many of us, right? But that was a priority. And then I also wanted to sit in on a bunch of talks and learn more about the craft of writing thrillers and suspense. I think it comes naturally to me. And I think that if I combine the two, I mean, even Bridgetown was almost as close as you get to, it's a fictitious story, but it's based on just a lot of the things I went through personally are in that book, but it's a fictitious story. But when you read it, like, in many ways, there's elements of memoir in it, because there are scenes that, I've lived out more times than I care to remember. And I think it's just a way to make the story that much better. And yeah, I'm really excited about it. But yeah, so thrillers, I think, is going to be my next direction. I am working on, I think I want to do a recovery prompt journal. I've wanted to do that for some time. I've had like interest from readers, and I've always wanted to just do something for myself to have too. So it's sort of self-serving, but yeah, I'm trying not to be all over the place. I think there's a common thread running through everything that I do, and that is books that matter and books that, open up people's minds. And I think that that's important, and
Yeah,
I'll be proud of the work I do. Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, you can tell it fills your soul, and that's what it's about, is being able to do what we love and, can share and bring messages like this to the still suffering. So I love it. I think it's fantastic that you're doing this. And we'll have to talk about books at some point, just like the whole writing process and all of that. And well, let me ask you, like right now, just one kind of broad paintbrush question about writing. Do you feel like, because I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I mean, and so maybe that's like a weird thing to say, but I'm just like winging it big time here. And so do you feel like there's, a lot of different things that you just kind of organically know how to do within the space of writing, or have you just kind of picked them up piecemeal as you've gone along?
I've always loved reading. My mom and dad let us boys stay up past our bedtime every night as long as we were reading as a kid. And so we could stay up an extra half hour, but only if we were reading. And so we sure showed them, right? So
Yeah.
but that, and I had my brother Jonathan, who passed away, was an avid reader, and he was always pushing books down, like passing them down to me. So I was reading up, so I love reading. So first and foremost, that was my foray into writing. I failed high school. I failed English in high school, and that's what got me kicked out of high school. Was I had 2 Fs in the semester, and so I mean, and it's not a lack of intelligence. It was probably more of a lack of effort. But I learned I'm learning as I go, and probably the same as you. I mean, I'm interested in craft. I want to know. Story structure, I think, is important. I keep somewhat of a safe distance because I want my work to be a little bit. I just want it a little more unique. And and there's nothing wrong with following a Save the Cat outline or beat sheets or whatnot. That's a great way to tell a story. But every time I start a new book, I feel like I'm in over my head, and I have to sort of find center and read a bunch. And so that's what I'm doing now is I'm just reading a bunch. I'm trying to familiarize myself with the genre, see what people are doing and what's going on. But I do try and plot. I will say that I do try and outline. That was very necessary with One Hit Away. And in fact, that was the only reason I was able to write One Hit Away, I think, with such honesty, was that they forced me to journal every day in treatment. And so when I left, I literally had a stack of yellow notepads, legal pads, with the journal every single day. And it sometimes was like 3 to 5 pages. And so I was able to go back and transcribe all of that. But wow. I do outline, I do try and give myself some direction, and that's just it. But a lot of rewrites, I'm not like naturally a talented writer, but I think the more you craft something, maybe I'm committed. Maybe that's what it is. I'm committed. Yeah. And so you do the rewrites. Every time you look at it, you think of a smarter way to say something. And that's pretty much it.
I love it. I think too, it seems like sometimes just even being open to like, where's this going to go? Like as it unfolds, like, because I'll start out and think I know what's happening or what I'm going to tell. Right. And then it just kind of takes detours. And if I'm not open to that, sometimes like I'm kind of, it's kind of a bummer. I'm kind of failing myself in a sense. So then I'll have to go through this process where I'm like, okay, pump the brakes, back it up, and like, maybe I really do need to talk about this thing that keeps presenting itself in my life or, so.
I will say, when I wrote One Hit Away, it was probably my number one priority besides writing a book that would help people was writing a book that was true and accurate. And my mom had gifted me a recovery memoir that wasn't true, and I knew it wasn't true a few scenes into it, and I didn't want anyone to question it, and so for example, the scene with me and the judge, that's literally verbatim to the transcript that I paid for an order from the courts and transcribed word for word and wrote it out. Literally, that's like the words that were spoken the day I pled guilty and stuff like that. And it was really painful for my mom to have to go back and relive a lot of these things, because I was like, Mom, fill me in on what was happening with you and Dad when I was here. Fill me in on what you were feeling. Tell me more about when you picked me up and took me to the hotel, because I don't remember a lot of it. And so my mom was able to sit down and give me a lot of that stuff. Really healing to go through that process, more so than I understood going into it. But also simultaneously painful, because you have to dig up old things. But that's what drew me to fiction, was being free of writing something that I felt I had to be so precise with and so accurate and so honest.
Yeah,
it's great. Like if you read some of my reviews, a lot of people, I think they latch onto that. So you'll see on like an honest memoir, honest retelling, an honest story, and I think that that's indicative of just the effort that went into that.
100%. So great. And I love, and I'm thankful that your mom went through it again to kind of, be sure that she could give her accurate perspective and portrayal of how all those times were. And, it's super important. And she sounds like a neat lady. I mean,
she's awesome.
Yeah.
She's awesome. I mean, you saw her letters. So all those letters, same thing. Those are all word for word letters that she was sending me when I was in treatment. I'm fortunate. I understand not everyone is as fortunate and doesn't have the same support system I have. You can't, that's life. It's like you don't pick your parents, you don't pick your family. I'm just very, very lucky to have them in my life and now in my kids' lives. So wonderful grandparents.
It's amazing. You get clean and sober and you just don't know what's around the corner. It's pretty incredible. It's incredible. And that's one thing that I always like to kind of wrap things up with, is asking people, it sounds a little cheesy, but if you did have one message to get across, because I always think, like, God, if I could just tell somebody who's walking around, with wine in their coffee cup today, hoping nobody finds out, trying to cover the smell of vodka on their breath, like, and just stuck in that cycle of Groundhog Day, like, what would it be like if I said, you know what, you can't see this now, but your life sober would be so much better. Because I think that I just didn't picture that it could ever be better if I quit drinking, which sounds crazy, but so I'm just wondering, do you have any kind of final message or something you like to kind of wrap up with?
I think the reason why One Hit Away has sits well with so many people is it's a memoir, but it's a story of how valuable a support system can be in helping someone get footing in their life. And so I would tell people, I think the message I would say is if you love someone who's struggling with addiction or substance use disorder, don't give up on them. And then also don't necessarily believe you have to wait for them to hit rock bottom, because some people don't hit rock bottom. They blow through rock bottom. I have a chapter called Rock Bottom's Basement. I lost my brother, and so many of his friends, a few of his friends came and told me at his funeral, I was waiting for him to hit rock bottom. And I was just like, he's been there for a long time. So I would say, don't give up hope on someone that you love. And then don't take it personally either, because a lot of times the people closest to us when we're using are the biggest threat to our addiction, and we push them away innately because they're a threat to our using. And so it's not always something personal. It's just you want me to change, I don't want to change, and I'll say whatever I have to get you to go away. So
Right.
don't give up hope on people. And I think that really is sort of what I wanted to write a book about. Thanking all the people that helped me get to where I am today.
Don't give up hope. That is so what I personally needed to hear today. And I know this will resonate with so many. And next month when we read it, I just cannot wait to discuss it with some of my buddies. And, I would be remiss. I should have said it when we were talking about it earlier, but I am so sorry about your brother, Jonathan. And I appreciate that you can talk about that. And I'm glad that you and your brother are both clean and sober.
Thank you.
Man, I'll tell you what, you meet the coolest people. You just meet the coolest people at these conferences and in the recovery space. And I just feel lucky and blessed, to come across people of your caliber, Jordan. And so thank you for sharing your story. I'm super glad we met, and I can't wait to, I would love to get together and do this again and talk about really deep dive into the whole book process too, because I think that that's so, it's just fun. It's just fun and fascinating talking to other authors.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. It'd be great.
Okay. So very, very important thing to note as I wrap up, Jordan and I will be accepting applications for those who are interested in the Children of Jerry's Club that we're going to start. I'm just kidding. So true story, though. I had a friend in high school named John Smith, and he was literally in a John Smith club. And this is, of course, prior to social media and all of that. So I just was like, oh, man, yeah, we got to start
awesome.
Children of Jerry Club. And, we'll get a phone number. We'll get 1-800-JERRY's or something like that. And I have no idea what we would ever talk about in that space, but you know what? We're going to figure it out. It's fine. It's all good. But on that note, I just want to say thanks again, Jordan. It's just what a gift talking to you. Thank you so much. And please tell Chelsea I said hi, and thank you for sharing your story. And for the listeners, get the book. We're going to talk about it next month. And don't forget to be kind and rewind. Thank you for the honor of your time. And don't forget to take what you like and leave the rest behind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. Keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.